Good evening. Welcome to our Monday, February 5th, 2024 Madison County School Board meeting. This meeting is now officially called to order. Will you please stand for a prayer and the pledge? We're going to have a silent prayer. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. We have one amendment to the agenda, and that's going to be a list under items for individual consideration. 5.9, the 2023-24 class size reduction compliance plan. Okay, that's the amendment to the agenda. May I have a motion to approve and a second to approve the agenda, please?
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
It is moved by Mr. Carroll, second by Mrs. Thompson, that we approve the agenda. All in favor of? Consent, Ms. Bishop. Okay. Now we will go under item number 3, public comment. And we have one person, Ms. Selena.
Legender.
Ma'am.
Out with that, Legender. A
Thank
lot of
you.
people can't pronounce my last name.
Exactly, and I was just gonna break it into syllables.
There you go. Would you like me to step up to the
Please.
microphone?
Yes, ma'am.
Or can I speak from here?
If you don't mind, please.
Okay. Well, I'm not very good at public speaking, so I'll do my best.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. First, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your time, for speaking with me over the past week or two. I do appreciate it. I appreciate your feedback
And
as
let me
well.
interrupt you right here, right now. Public comments, it's limited to 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am, I'm aware.
But by the, if you need a few more minutes.
Okay.
And you're the only one on the agenda, I will give you those few minutes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, to get started, and Ms. Joseph, I promise I'm not going over no proposals tonight. I'm gonna make it short and sweet. Good evening. My name is Selena. I was told by some that the public does not need to hear the truth. I've also been told by others that I've spoken to that someone needs to step up and let the public be made aware of this lie that's been told every time we get a new superintendent and the subject of restructuring or closing all of the outlying schools comes up. Simply put, it was a lie that's been told for so long by so many people that you eventually believe it's true. That's not the case. If it was the case, then the court case number would have been referenced in both restructuring surveys, and it would have been referenced in the last committee's suggestions based on the results from the restructuring survey. It is not stated or referenced in any of them. All of them suggested closing one outlying school along with a very long list of other suggestions to save district money. It's easier on the district to just say if we close one school, we have to close them all due to some court case or law that never existed, so they don't get any pushback from the community. However, with the current financial situation, I do not believe the easy way is the best way to go about this because it affects too many people. These are our schools, our children, and our staff. They are not just numbers on a chart or dollar signs. They are people. Looking over the last restructuring survey and committee suggestions, along with Ms. Joseph's proposals that were passed out at the last board meeting to the board members, we will have to close a minimum of 2 outlying schools after looking at all the information. No one wants to close their school. I have personally went from 8 proposals down to 2 proposals once I had all the information and realized that the money wasn't there to support the proposals and cover the current deficit. For the best interest of the parents, children, and staff, We can keep A option open for everyone and minimize staff layoffs. Or you could go the easy route and close all 3 outlying schools, not leaving parents a choice on public schools, maximizing layoffs, or increase losing more students out of the district. I would suggest looking into a proposal that benefits the parents, the children, and the staff. Now, I have 2 questions, Mr. Reeves, and they're for you. They're very simple, yes or no remarks. Is that okay?
It's fine that you ask. I can't guarantee I can answer a question yes or no until I hear it.
Okay. I am aware that you're the attorney for the school board. I just need to
Yes.
ask you first, is there any local court case in this county where a judge has determined if you close one outlying school, you have to close all 3?
There has been no court case. There were consent orders, it is my understanding, that were issued, and I can certainly explain that.
Okay, is there any law that establishes if you close one outlying school, you must close all 3?
There is no law, but there were consent orders, which I can explain.
Okay, I just needed to clarify that, because every time this comes about, every time we have a new superintendent, I'm not the only one that hears this. I've heard this from prior board members. I've heard this from current board members. I've heard this from employees with the school district, that we can't close one outlying school due to some court case in this county or to some law that was established, and I need to clarify that for everyone here. That's not the case.
Madam Chairman, may I clarify?
Yes, sir.
So what happened in Madison was different than many other counties. What happened originally, and I'm sure everybody's heard about the landmark cases, Brown versus Board of Education, all of that dealt with desegregation. Many school districts resisted desegregation, and so they had to go to court. Madison was not one of those districts. What had happened at that point in time, and I'm telling you what I have been told, not what I was a party of, because this happened 50 plus years ago. What happened was the United States Department of Education, by that point, remember we're at the end of the 60s there, the Great Society programs, and the federal government was providing lots of funding for schools. What the Department of Education started to do, though, was rather than filing cases to desegregate, they simply had a policy that they would withhold federal funds if the school district didn't enter into a consent decree where they would desegregate. And so that's what happened. That's not a court case. If someone's looking for a court case, I don't believe they will find one. But there was a consent decree between the school district and the United States Department of Education that said they would desegregate. Now, I have been told that consent decree provided for the actual for the attendance zones for the various schools, and that we were not allowed to change those attendance zones without getting clearance from the Department of Education. Now, that consent decree would have been, as I said, 50 plus years old. I've never seen a copy of that consent decree, and I've never seen, and we have not been able to get a copy of it from the Department of Education nor the district that I'm aware of. I started practicing in 1994 and been here, been associated with the district ever since. Now, I can tell you what I was a party to was when we were doing the new schools for the outlying schools years ago. What had happened was the state had set up a program called Special Facilities Funding, and that program's still around in some form. I don't know the details, but at any rate, they would pay for the construction of new schools if you got the schools approved. Part of the approval process, and this would have been in the late 90s, part of that approval process was that they would only pay in the outlying schools for Madison, meaning Greenville, Pinetta, and Lee. They would only pay for a new K through 5. They would not pay for a new school if we decided to keep the 6th, 7th, and 8th at those schools. By that time, they had already lost their high schools in Greenville and Lee, and I'm not familiar with whether Pinetta had a high school. I assume they did. At any rate, so we went through that process. At that point in time, the school board member from Lee and the folks at Lee did not wish to give up their 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And so the school board said, well, if you don't, you're going to have this old facility and all of that. And they said, we don't care, we want to keep it. So what happened was the school board proceeded on that basis. And they said, okay, if that's the way y'all want it, that's fine. Y'all keep your older schools and we'll do newer schools at the other institution. When that did happen, though, someone filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of General Counsel in Atlanta. At that point, and I was present for this, at that point, we had a meeting here in this room, in fact, and I can still remember the gentleman's name. His name was Philip Lyde, and he was from the U.S. Department of Education. And at that time, in the late 90s, he had been there since the late 60s. He was actually familiar with the Madison case that had happened earlier. And so what Mr. Lyde said at that time was that we were not required to do any particular thing, but if we wanted, if we did not treat all of the outlying schools the same, meaning bring in all the grades, bring in the same grades, whatever we did, that they were going to come in and do I think the way he put it, to the best of my recollection, was they were going to do a top-down reevaluation of whether or not the school district complied with all the federal regulations that they have to comply with. The school board at that time chose not to engage in a top-down review of whether or not the district complies with all these regulations, and they decided to treat all of the schools the same way. At that point, they voted over the objections of the citizens of Lee and the representative from Lee, if I remember correctly, to move in the 6th, 7th, and 8th from Lee to the central school. And then we found money somehow, some way to do the school in Lee. And I don't remember exactly where we got that money. It wasn't in that initial funding. So, to be very clear, is there a court case? Answer, no. What I have been told we have is a consent decree with the Department of Education. I've never seen a copy of the written consent decree. I know in the past, and this is 30 years ago, under the Clinton administration, now we're, different presidents and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what U.S. Department of Education would do today. But back then, they said that they did not say we absolutely positively could not treat all of the schools differently, but said that they would re-engage in that process and do a top-down evaluation whether or not we complied with everything. At that point in time, the school board chose to avoid that and bring in the grades from Lee to the central school. The grades in Pinetta and Greenville had already been brought in.
For the middle school grades.
The 6th, 7th, and 8th. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just needed to clarify that, because this has been going on for over a decade, that every time this comes up, every time we have a new superintendent, this has always been told to me. I've had other people that have said, I've heard the exact same thing. Where's the clarification on this?
You now know what I know.
Thank you, even though we don't have the paperwork to go with it, but at least that's clarified. I
have had
appreciate
the
that.
paperwork. I've lost the paperwork, but I'm sure we can get it back from Atlanta, Georgia. And what department is that, Ms. Hubbard?
Office of General Counsel.
Civil
Office of
Rights.
Civil Rights.
Office of Civil Rights. And I have had that, and it's somewhere to my house.
I've seen
Okay.
that.
I've
I
moved.
just wanted to make sure it wasn't anything
I have
local
seen
that's
it, I have
current
read
that
it.
states that if you
I
close
like
one
it.
outlying elementary school, that you have to close all three. Because looking at the numbers and looking at proposals that I've been over, some of them I've spoke with a lot of you about, I would love the opportunity to not take the easy way out and just say close all three. I would love to see a proposal that gives us an option to at least give parents a choice for another elementary school. That way we are minimizing staff layoffs. We're giving parents a choice on whether they want central school or another public elementary school. And still have the funding to bring in our extracurriculars that we talked about, to bring in our wood shop, to bring in sewing, to bring in home ec, you name it, etc. I would like that to be deeply and thoroughly looked into in the finances, because from what I've come up with my proposal, the funding is there to keep another school open as an option.
Well, and I think if that's something the board wanted to consider, I think the first step you would do is you need to reach out to the Office of Civil Rights and see
Atlanta,
what their
Georgia.
position is, because again, I'm telling you, almost 30 years ago.
It
what
has
they said
not
was
changed.
about. Yeah.
I'll get Ms. Bishop to look for that.
It has not
consent
changed.
decree, because I saw that a couple of years ago.
That's
It
exactly.
exists.
It has not changed.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. On our consent agenda, we have our 4.1 minutes, 4.2 Madison County High School supplement update, 4.3 fundraisers, 4.4 disposition of surplus property, 4.5 joint use of agreement with Boys to Kings, and 4.6 purchase orders for ESE contracted services, 4.7 Willan Glenn Act 2024 Summer Nutrition Program. Can I have a motion and a second, please, for the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It has been properly moved by Mr. Carroll, second by Mrs. Gibson, that we approve the consent agenda.
I had a question for 4.6, but Mrs. Joseph answered it for me, so
Okay,
I feel
thank you. Board members?
I'm okay.
Your vote, please. Unanimous, Ms. Bishop. Okay, items for individual consideration, 5.1, personnel changes, Mr. Killingsworth.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This evening, I only have one instructional recommendation, that is Ms. Davis. That is with the mental health counselor, and it is paid out of the mental health allocation. And then we have two substitutes that I'm asking your approval. That is Ms. Johnson and Ms. Mays. Those are the only names that we have on personnel for this evening.
Board members, would you like to do the volunteers at the same time, please? Okay. Mr. Killingsworth, 5.2, volunteers.
Yes, ma'am, that was the two names, Ms. Johnson and Ms. Mays, that I was recommending.
Okay, that was for two.
Volunteers.
5.2.
5.2.
I apologize. 5.2, we have 22 individuals, as you can see, with the various schools that we have within the district. And to the side of that also stipulates what capacity they'll be at, whether in the classroom, field trips, mentor, internship, extracurricular, a club, things of that nature. All of those are listed off to the right of those individuals' names.
Okay, board members?
I move to approve the personnel changes as well as the volunteers.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Mrs. Gibson, second by Mr. Carroll, that we approve the personnel changes and the volunteers. Questions? There be none, we'll take the vote. All in favor? Unanimous, Ms. Bishop.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Okay, 5.3, public hearing, student progression plan. Ms. Hill.
Thank you. We've advertised the changes for the student progression plan. Those changes are updates, one from the state on the Bright Futures qualifications and the different levels, and then a clarification on some wording to do with student rank at the high school.
Okay, we're now going to open this meeting for public comments. One time. Any comments from the public? Two times. Comments from the public? Three times. Comments from the public? If there be none, we'll close it. Comments to the public. Finish, Ms. Hill.
So we're recommending these changes to go into effect immediately upon approval from the board.
Board members, your third.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the student progression plan.
I second.
It has been properly moved by Mrs. Thompson, second by Mrs. Knight, that we approve the student progression plan. Questions? There be none. We'll take the vote. All in favor? Unanimous, Ms. Bishop.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. 5.4, internal accounts audit. Who's going to do that?
Mr. Busher will come forth and review that. All of you should have a copy of the audits for each school. They're not, she's only, no, that's just one set.
That's just one.
That's just one set, that's hers. Everybody else has electronic copy.
Yes.
It's in your, it's in the,
Yeah.
it's in here.
It's 5.4.
Did you sign in or you want to put it?
It's a public thing, the public needs to see.
Did you put it on, he said it's not on there.
It's on mine.
I got mine.
She's working on it.
And also, anytime you need official bound copies, we can get as
Okay.
many as you want. I've provided
Please.
3 full sets.
Usually we'll mail one. Have you been mailing us
He said
one?
it's on there.
Well, you got those, but the last 2 years, I think, sent them out electronic.
Okay.
I got one mailed
Board
last year.
docs?
I got one,
I got one
They were
last year in
mailed.
the mail.
Okay.
That's 5.4.
But primarily tonight, what I'm
Anybody
gonna,
need this one until,
No.
okay.
I'm gonna review the summary. That's what we're gonna hit on, with all the findings, that's the key. And if you got any other questions, I can highlight different things out of the article. Otherwise, we'd be here a long time tonight. So.
Thank you.
But before we begin, I'm gonna pass the summary out, which is long enough as it is.
Thank you.
I must have clicked to get back to the progression plan.
Thank you.
I'm there, thank you. Thank you. I apologize.
You find them?
I found them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. He said it's gonna be short. What is it gonna be short?
Okay, again, what you got here is a summary. Now, I'm gonna go through it in pretty much detail. But this summary is really broken down into 4 areas. The general area, then the second is a summary of the audit results, and then the third is adjustments that we had to make this year, which we normally don't make. And then fourth is the summary of all the internal control findings. I'm gonna go walk you through each one of those. First is the general, and we conducted audits. This is for the year ending June 30th, 2023. They were conducted in accordance with government auditing standards, which is a level of standards higher than normal audit standards. We incurred 244 hours in the audit, the 5 audits, one for each of the schools this year, which was a little less than last year. Last year we had 302. We did some staff shifting, which helped with that. Primarily me and Colin Jones, another CPA, did 100% of the work, whereas usually some of our staff may do some of the testing on a limited basis. So we were able to save some time there. But anyway, so that we fared a little better with that. The second area, the summary of the audit results, we issued unmodified opinions for all 5 schools. One of them was a little bit debatable, but we managed to continue, and I'm going to go over that in just a minute. We encountered no significant difficulties or disagreements with any of the staff. Everything went very smooth. We had some delays in obtaining access to the initial computerized new system, which we partly probably because of the hurricane and everything else that transpired. And also, first year, I think,
It
for
was
the
our first
staff,
year doing that.
trying to get we gained access October 16th. So then we worked real hard to try to get them out as quick as we could. Our report was dated December 18th, which is when we finalized everything. And I think we were like a day or two just late beyond that December meeting, and then we had complications in January. So here we are tonight. The third area is recorded audit adjustments. Historically, for all the years I've been involved in this, we've never had material adjustments that needed to be made, which we did this year. And I'll explain the adjustment, then I'm going to come back through as we go through the review of internal control findings. I'll go into more details. But basically, we had audit adjustments for the high school and also Pinetta. The high school, what happened, I'm not going to try to get too much detail right now. If y'all recall, last year, y'all directed the schools to close their CDs and put everything into a regular bank account. Well, I don't know if it was the new software or just not really knowing how to do that in the statements. What they did is they recorded that closure of that CD as the transfer into the regular operating account and basically recorded as receipts or revenue. So as a result, some of the, like in high school, 2 accounts were overstated. They took basically $56,000 and spread it between the athletics and softball. Athletics was $46,000 some odd dollars and softball was $10,000. So we corrected that through a journal entry. And so, again, the total was $56,000. In Pinetta, the same thing happened, but it was $5,200 in change. So we made those adjustments and they corrected the financials. So those are our 2 audit adjustments that were material enough to warrant a change. So we reflected those, got those changed in the financial statements. So the 4th area I wanted to cover is the summary of the actual internal control findings. So if you turn to page 2, halfway down, you'll see the total annual cash receipts for each of the schools for the internal funds. And of course, the high school has by far the bulk of it, but each of these schools actually go through and do a separate audit for each of them. We don't combine it all and do one big audit. They're all individual audits. So even though, let's say, Pinetta had $20,000 and $20,435 in receipts, we treat that totally separate. We determine our separate materiality levels for that and determine the amount of testing to do for that particular school. So some of these schools are small receipts, but they have numerous transactions, which that takes a really large part of our time, going through that. Because we have to go through actually calculations to determine how many tests we make and so forth, how many items. So for the total findings for this year, we had a total of 14 for all the schools. For last year in 22, we had 10. So we had 4 more findings. In the high school, we had 1 material weakness and 3 significant deficiencies. Now, a material weakness, there's a little description down at the bottom, is basically a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in the internal control of each of the schools, such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the school's financial statements could take place, but not be prevented or detected through the regular course of business. Because with controls in place, if there's a mistake or an error or an intentional error, then it should get detected if all the controls are in place. But a material weakness means that something could go through and not get detected because the control's so weak. Or maybe the control is there, but it's not being utilized the way it needs to be. Significant deficiency is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in the internal control that's less severe than a material weakness. But it's important for us to bring it up and mention it here. Then the 3rd type of finding is just an instance of non-compliance. It could be a finding that's a breach of a law, such as the Florida Red Book, the Florida Department of Education, the school board policy, or some kind of contract regulation or anything like that. So looking back at the high school, we had a total of 4. I'm going to go into those. The Central School, we had 2, Pinetta 3, Greenville 2, Lee Elementary 2. So let's flip over to page 3. And then also, when we have these findings, which are more detailed than I'm going to go over here, they're presented to the schools, and the schools respond of how they're going to resolve it and take care of it, basically. And they all, indicated that they'd make corrective action, take care of it, and resolve the issue. The first item I want to mention is the high school. And that's considered a material weakness, and that's where the CDs basically were moved from the CDs into the operating account. And when they did that, they overstated athletics and the softball account. And keep in mind, there's probably like 60 different accounts. So the way it should work is you've got cash over here. That cash could be broken down into several bank accounts, 10 CDs, it doesn't matter. The total is cash. That cash should equal the total into all those various internal accounts. You know, it's Beta Club or athletics or whatever it may be, or cheerleading, you know, one of those accounts. So what happened is when those CDs were transferred into the operating account, we made this a material weakness because of the dollar amount, but it overstated those two accounts, which, first of all, really shouldn't have gone to those two accounts. I mean, let's say if money was out there that wasn't previously reported, it'd really be spread to all the accounts, but it was just improperly done. So when that was done, there was sufficient funds in those two accounts, but if that money wasn't at least on paper, put in there, those accounts would have been overdrawn. And that's where you can't let that happen. So that's why we made it a material weakness. Because that would be in violation, and let me take this a step further. So on the bank reconciliation, now I'll show you a sample on page, it'll be on page 10 and 11. So this is actually the little rectangular boxes are copies of those CD accounts. And you can see, for instance, in the first one, that this number 13250 is a 33-month Premier Choice account. There was $30,389 in there, plus there was some, I think, accrued interest. That was all withdrawn. The ending balance by March 31st was zero. So, but that happened in each of the other two CDs. And then if you flip the page, and here's where the issue where it didn't really get picked up. The bank accounts were still being reconciled, but still those three CDs were still shown on there. And that's, that should have been a red flag immediately by whoever's doing the reconciliation or the school principal. Then in addition to that, if you look down, where they certified it wasn't dated. In the past, sometimes we saw that way after the fact, maybe done months later. But that should have been red flag right there. So there were several errors that should have been picked up along the way. And therefore, it's a material finding. But it has been corrected. And not jump into the whys of all this happened, but in all the schools, as I go through this, there was quite a bit of turnover. And whenever there's turnover, it's hard to kind of retrain, have a new system working in it, a new software system. And when you have that much turnover, it's so important to try to retrain those, but it's difficult. Sometimes there's voids there and you don't have anybody, and somebody else has to fill those shoes, whereas somebody from the board office or whoever. So these kind of things happen. Let's stay on page 3. And the next item is a significant deficiency regarding pre-numbered tickets. There's a total of 3 significant deficiencies. We noted that as we went through our testing, there were 5 instances where admission sales at athletic events were not supported by pre-numbered tickets. And if you recall, a couple of years ago, we didn't have any control over that whatsoever. It was like whatever cash was turned in, that's what was reported. And basically, Florida Red Book, the Department of Education, Chapter 8, Section 3, so forth, all money collected by the school must be substantiated by pre-numbered receipts, consecutively numbered cash receipt records and reports of monies collected, pre-numbered tickets, reports of tickets issued and sold and so forth. In other words, there has to be auditable records there. And so in this case, some of the pre-numbered tickets were just either not used or they weren't accounted for. And I'm going to go into an example in just a second on another school because they're all related the same way. Let's see, if we turn to page 4, the top of the page, there was another significant deficiency at the high school. And funds were collected and held outside the school office. And basically, the Florida Red Book says collections made outside the school office must be turned into the school no later than the next business day. And if y'all recall, several years ago, y'all had a policy that had to be turned in by that day. And I suggested some flexibility there, particularly if you got an athletic event that night. But in this case, and I don't remember the exact number of days, but there were days where that money was held before it was actually turned in. And that can certainly be a problem. Right below that's another significant deficiency I've outlined. Disbursements were made without proper authorization noted in the file. There were no documentation of that. So as we were going through our test, and we noted 2 instances where disbursement was not properly authorized according to what was in the system. One was a check requisition not signed by the organization sponsor, which is required. The other disbursement was an electronic transfer, and no check requisition was created. And so there's no evidence of authorization by anyone for the transaction. It just happened. And of course, that's in violation, as I noted here, of Florida Red Book as well. Any questions on the high school?
I've got a question.
Okay.
We've already discussed it once, but we'll discuss it again. Okay, the parking, paying to park at the high school at the football games. There's one person there, you hand them the money, but there's no, I don't see tickets or anything like that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that, to protect that person, I would think that we'd want to have a little different system.
Right, and we have talked about that. What I'm referring to here is just ticket sales. And the parking situation is just a,
But let me ask you something, those are monies that has to be accounted for.
that's right.
So that should be in the audit report,
Well.
I think. That's monies that are accountable for.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm just saying.
Well,
since
all
that's
that really falls under the ticket issue.
Ticket?
Yeah, this, it's not just athletic tickets, but it's parking, it's everything. There's no,
So we've got to do something different.
yeah, you need to do something different.
Yes, thank
We
you.
talked about, literally you can buy a roll of tickets. And
I
you know,
understand.
the beginning and ending ticket number, and you account for all those, and there's a sheet, which I think I've got a sample here. I'll show you what's kind of done, but it doesn't do any good if it's not properly completed, and you've got volunteers doing that.
So
And that's what makes it
We need to do
difficult.
some accountability
Sure,
with that.
sure.
Thank you.
On page 4, halfway down, we'll begin with the central school. There were 2 significant deficiencies. The first one, where there were cash transfers that lacked proper approval. There were actually 6 internal fund transfers that we selected for testing. Only 1 was properly supported, so there are 5 that were not. So in the 5 transfers, there was just no support for the transfer. So it's, although it may be 100% legitimate, to be in compliance with particularly y'all's bylaws and policies manual, it says the organization sponsor shall participate along with the school bookkeeper in the designation of transactions to be recorded in each of the organization's accounts. Class and club monies shall be expended for the benefit of the class or club or for the purposes designated by the class or club that participated in the generation of the revenues. But also, to go a step further, a bookkeeper can't make that decision. So there needs to be documentation that says it's not his or her decision, that it's that club that's making that decision. Because if we get into where the school has control of that, it changes a whole lot. We're in violation of some of the GASB rulings and so forth. So it needs to be the club's decision. So there has to be documentation and authorization for that. And there is a form that they just need to be using.
Okay, because I'm looking here, and I did do some notations. under the high school, and it says, in one instance, the amount actually collected was over $700 higher than the amount collected according to the ticket count sale.
That's right.
So we've got to do something
Yeah,
about,
and that's for the tickets, that's right. So there's just, basically, it's whatever they have to turn in, and it could be over or it could be under. And you get into some questions as far as the officials getting paid, so forth.
so
But,
maybe that was some of the parking or whatever, I don't know. But something has to be done, accountability.
and I've got an example in just a minute. So for the interfund transfers, you know, the money's not missing, it's all there. It was just transferred without proper authorization. So on the bottom of the page, another significant deficiency were the deposits from ticket sales that weren't properly supported. And I've got an example of that. Just, I didn't want to bore you with examples on everything, but if you turn to page 12 and 13, just to give you an example, this is for the central school again, and we had the same issue with the high school and the central school. But if you look at this example, on the left-hand side is the report of tickets sold, and there were 54 tickets sold at $5 a piece, $270. But if you look over on the right-hand side, this is the cash reconciliation from that. We're $215.50. You know, so it just, you know, doesn't tie. Those two should equal. And then one other thing that I would add, that I didn't put in my report, I would have signatures and dates on each of those. So to affix accountability. You know, who's responsible for this? So let's turn to page 5. And then reference to the monies collected, you know, again, that's in violation of Florida Red Book. You're required to have pre-numbered receipts and tickets and so forth, or something comparable. On page 5, looking at Lee Elementary, we had a total of 2 significant deficiencies and 1 non-compliance. The first one, we noted that in our testing, all but 2 of the receipts selected for testing did not use pre-numbered receipts as required. And there is an example on that. We go to page 13, 14. Let me make sure, 13, 14. Okay, down at the bottom of the page, for example 3, with the new system, when you put money in, it generates a receipt. Not a receipt, but a numbering system, which to me, doesn't really mean a whole lot. I mean, it helps just to kind of have accountability for the sequence there, but it doesn't really affix responsibility, because you could have receipts coming in and just never hit the system, never generates a computerized pre-numbered item. But so this issue is really pertains to Greenville, Lee, and Pinetta. But let's see, this one's, you know, this example's from Lee. So down at the very bottom, you'll see the line item being generated. It's number 6. But if you flip the next page, and that was for $60. If you flip the next page, we've got the report of monies collected. There's no accountability for like pre-numbered receipts. In other words, should it have really been $90? I don't know. Because if a receipt was written and it's pre-numbered, you know, you just can't toss it in the trash. So these need to be pre-numbered. Really, the report does, but there's also supposed to be a receipt generated. The report's to be prepared by the teacher or sponsor. They fill this out. They go to the school secretary and turn the money in. That secretary should issue a receipt that's pre-numbered. And it would be helpful if this was pre-numbered. But then also, if you look at this example, we don't know who really filled this out. Did the secretary or did the sponsor fill it out? Should be the sponsor. There's no signatures on here, and there's no date at the bottom as far as they're certifying to. So, going back to page, make sure I'm in the right place, page 5. The second significant deficiency, and all but one of the items examined for testing, the organization did not sign the check requisition. So they got to, the organization needs to request the funds. They do that by filling out a check requisition. They sign it, turn it in, then it's done. In other words, you got authorization from the sponsor, the organization. Then it goes from there, you have to have dual signatures and so forth. So there was no check requisitions. And that's in violation of Red Book and also the school board policy. On the bottom of the page is another this is a non-compliance. So it's less than a significant deficiency. But we noted one of the checks did not have properly supported receipts or invoice. The disbursement was approved via a check requisition, okay? And the check was properly signed with dual signatures, but there was not there was nothing there to support it, like a receipt. Okay. Page 6, Greenville. There were 2 significant deficiencies. The first is the pre-numbered receipts, as we've already mentioned, same as Lee. Second, there where checks were only signed by one signer instead of two signatures. There were 7 different instances of that. And that's in violation of both the Red Book and also your own policy. The bottom of the page for Pinetta on page 6, there were 3 significant deficiencies. The first, this goes back to the CDs. We kind of use a little fancier language that financial information properly reviewed and cash balances and receipts were overstated. So same thing as the high school. The CD that was cashed in went to the playground account and subsequently, spent. So the same issue. It doesn't appear that we're going to have problems with the CDs anymore because y'all made a decision to close that. And, because we had some issues last year with some outside accounts, so y'all made a decision just to, bring it into one operating account. On page 7, third of the way down, the significant deficiency, monies collected, reports, and pre-numbered receipts not used. So there were 2, let me see here. Okay, we noted pre-numbered receipts and monies reports were not maintained by the school. Not maintained, not that they were missing a few here and there. These 2 documents are required to be used with all receipts. The money collected report, and again, that's used by the sponsor and signed off, dated, turned into the school. And the other is the just use of pre-numbered receipts by the secretary bookkeeper. Okay. The next one down, there were disbursements made without proper approval on file. So, and this is broken down to several areas, but there were 34 check disbursements that we tested, and for Pinetta, that's pretty significant as a percentage. But out of the 24, there were significant deficiencies. There was no documentation in the school file showing either authorization or supporting evidence such as a receipt for 14-0. So no documentation for that, other than some of the requests and check signing, but there was no receipts. For an additional 7 items, the file contained an incomplete check requisition that was missing, the signature authorization of either the organization sponsor or the principal. And there were 2 more items that were supported by actually, that may be a typo. 2 more items were supported by, well, no, that's correct. Were supported by correctly completed check requisitions, but were not supported by receipts or invoices. And there was one last disbursement that contained no amount on the check requisitions showed a check requisition was not signed by an organization sponsor and had no supporting evidence. So it's kind of a mix of different things. So that's it. Do y'all have any questions on these that I've just covered? Then I'm going to give you my recommendations, just very general. Do you have any specific questions relating to any of these?
No, sir, but when I was going through my stuff and through my documentation, and you made some recommendations about additional training and possibly a training booklet. And I like that because we go through this computerized stuff and we do stuff online and whatever, and sometimes we need a cheat sheet. So that training booklet that you're talking about, I'm saying and guessing that we do need these little cheat sheets so that you can pull it out, and when any new person comes, they can pull that out if they have had the training or not. It will list the basic things. So thank you for that recommendation.
Sure. On page 9, there are two things. Let's see. Well, let me back up to that just a minute. My suggestion would be to have, like you said, a training book, a policy manual, because the same procedures should be used for every school. It's the same rules, laws, regulations have to be followed by each of the schools. And sometimes they do, all these years, they tend to do something different until they get hand slapped, and you train them to do something different, and then there's a changeover. But with the, higher the turnover, it makes, the school officials' job a little difficult to kind of follow through all that. So if there was some type of a summary of what needs to take place that they can use as a reference, if there's changeover, which there always will be, it will make life a lot easier for everybody, with the superintendent, Rose, and everyone else as they're following through with that. So, but on page 9, out of what I've reported here, the area of most concern continues to be disbursements. Issues in this area included, checks missing, dual signatures, funds dispersed without proper support, and lack of, maybe competitive bidding process required, on some of the smaller items. And the second thing is the athletic event ticket, again, whether it's parking or attendance. They need to be reconciled correctly and somehow have volunteers, consistent volunteers. And again, you're dealing with volunteers, and maybe in some cases you may have school officials there doing it, but it needs to be consistent. So, any questions? All right. Again, if y'all have questions later, contact me. I'll be glad to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Board members? You didn't have any questions? And you've heard the audit report? May I have a motion and a second to accept it, please?
I move to improve the internal accounts audit.
I second.
It's been properly moved by Mrs. Gibson, second by Mrs. Knight, that we approve the internal account audits. There were no questions. We'll take the vote. All in favor of? Unanimous. Ms. Bishop. 5.5, financial report. Ms. Rose.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As we start our financial report, I will walk through each funding, each fund with revenues and expenses, and/or if any financial fund balances are there. The first one is general revenue. In this reporting period, we had total revenues so far this year of $11.7 million, which is 53% of what we're expecting. And we had expenses of $12.17 million, which is about $450,000 more than the revenues came in. remembering that taxes come in at different times, so it impacts the statement amounts when we give that, because we've spent approximately 44%, but we've received 53%, and we're still showing that it's impacting that because of the bigger revenues had not come in when this was reported. So that took our fund balance from 15.34 to 15.98. Even though we had the 450 down, we still are showing a little bit more in there. Again, that will be heavily impacted on what happens with our hurricane deductibles and the bond issues that we have to take out. Fund, I do say at the bottom of that fund, there are some general comments that you've got, some about the insurance. We were down at Fizbit last week, and it looks like our property insurance is going to be about $1.3 million this year, which is up from $820,000 last year. Then you have the hurricane, of course, and the final recalibration of Survey 2 came in, and it shows us with 120.75 FTE down from what the original forecast was for the district, which, again, digs very deeply into our finances and revenues. Fund 2000, Fund 200, which is your debt service. We had revenues of 52,000, expenses of 22. We're still waiting on our parimutuel funding to come in. We'll still have interest money that will come in on that. This whole account, this whole fund will change drastically when it comes to the bonding that we're going to be doing. Fund 3,000 or 300, which is fixed capital outlay. We have 1.3 million in revenues and 665,000 in expenses. We did just get notice from the Department of Education about the amount we need to share this year with charter schools. For James Madison, it's about 5,500. For Madison Creative Arts, it's about 10,500. That will change every year. It'll go to 40% next year, 60, 80 to 100%. As they get money out of the capital outlay that comes to the district, the other PICO money that they get from the state of Florida will be reduced at the same level. So it'll be reducing what the state's general fund is putting into it and taking it from the capital outlay fund here. It will also change because when we go into a bond issue, this is what we pay the charter schools then will be based on the amount of debt that we have. So right now, we only have the 900,000 in the parimutuel funds, but it'll be significantly larger when we go to bonding. 4,100 is the food service fund. We had 642,000 in revenues, but 850,000 in expenses. You do see that there is a pending food claim for $84,000 that will help that discrepancy between the two. And I was just informed this morning that there is another 130,000 claim that will be submitted for January, so that will impact this as well. So it should be pretty close to even when we get done with those claims. Fund 4,200, which is your title programs, your federal entitlements. 941,000 in revenues, 1,160,000 in expenses. The difference of 219,000 is in transit between requests for reimbursement. That fund will never have a fund balance. It should break even. Fund 4430. Remember, our CARES, our ESSER 1 is all over. 4430 and 4440 are the two parts of the CRRSA, the coronavirus, second part, ESSER 2. We had $64,400 in revenues, $64,500 in expenses, pretty much a wash for the big part of CARES or ESSER 2. The 4440, which is the smaller part of ESSER 2, 78,000 in revenues, 78,000 in expenses. Pretty much equal wash on that. Those two will close those two are closed right now. Those 44, 40, and 30 and 40 are closed right now, but they'll still be in your reports until we actually transition out to the next budget year. 4450, that's the big pot of American Rescue Plan. We had 954,000 in revenues, 993 in expenses. The difference is waiting reimbursement. And the final fund is 4460. We had 265,000 in revenues, 284,000 in expenses, approximately 19,000 more in expenses, awaiting reimbursement right now from the Department of Education. Are there any questions? If not,
The,
yes.
on that, on the general fund up there, all this red down at the bottom,
Oh, those are just flags for you to know that there's a lot of legislation pending that will impact us in some way or another. They're asking, there's pending legislation, it appears to be moving to raise teacher salaries to 60,000. There is pending legislation, it's already passed one legislative body about pre-K, moving it from part-time to full-time. Class size compliance, although we do not have a penalty this year, we did have, I believe it was 21 classes. That means periods during the class, like 6-period day, that's 6 classes, that had over the class size by one student. So we had to do a compliance plan. I'm not sure if that's been,
That's the one that's gonna be
Going okay.
5.9.
all righty. And again, the very bottom part is showing you where the FTE is hitting compared to last year.
too much red on this, Mr. Renee.
I'm sorry.
Way too much red, you're gonna have to get
I'm
some,
sorry.
get a different color.
Any other questions?
Rose, I think you mentioned at one of our town hall meetings about being down 100 FTE, which equated to about 950,000. Of course, now you're saying 125 down, but
120.
what we're waiting for right now is what's going to happen because of that. There's got to be a repercussion, right? If we're down that money.
Well, our funding will be adjusted. So what they did was they forecasted our funding in May of last year, and then they refinalized it in July. And then at the second calculation, which happened after they had initial enrollments, they adjusted it again. After this calculation, they'll adjust it again. The next funding notice that we get will adjust it, which is showing the 120 below, which also impacts the revenue, and it also impacts the total amount a person could get if they got every single penny of all the categoricals plus the base funding. And then we will get, we have FTE week is this week. Right now for the survey 3, once those calculations are in and recalibrated, typically it typically goes down a little bit further from survey 2 to survey 3, but we don't know. Once that comes in, then we'll get a 4th calculation, and then we'll get a final calculation at the end of the year, which trues up all the numbers. So what they'll do is they'll go back to the original forecast, they'll make adjustments along the way, and then at the end of the year, they'll make the final adjustments. So that will be reflected, the lost revenue per FTE will be reflected in those final calculations. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, we're not going to get into it right now, but basically, we have less students. That's what it boils down to.
Pretty much.
And when
pretty
you've got
much.
less students, something has to be done. I mean, in other words, we have to look at, but we won't get into that right now. I'm just saying, I'm just telling you. We will get into it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
Okay. Board members, you've heard the financial report from Ms. Rose. Do you all want to
I
accept?
move to approve the financial report.
Accept
second.
Because that's what we do, we accept the financial
Accept it.
report, we don't
Accept
approve
it.
that. Okay, second?
I second.
Okay, it has been properly moved and second that we accept the financial report. Been moved by Mrs. Gibson, second by Mrs. Knight. All in favor, please show your hand. Unanimous, Ms. Becky. 5.6, staff travel, Ms. Joseph.
My staff travel, I've got a trip request for Mr. Travis Jones. This is paying out of general fund registration, $125. He's going to Tallahassee to Asa, Florida. That is for adult ed program, and that's not an overnight trip. Okay, we've got an trip request for Mr. Travis Jones and Heather Moats to go to Tampa to Hillsborough County Adult and Education Center, February 15th and 16th. They're going down there to work with someone to sort of work with them in ensuring that we can update our adult ed program, because we're not using it to its fullest. And that these persons, they found that they are kind of quite qualified into that. And we've got Mr. Rod Williams, who wants to attend the National Student Safety and Security Council in Orlando on April 24th through 26th, and this is being reimbursed by PACE. And Mr. Ben Killingsworth, this is not an overnight trip. He's going down to NEFAC to the HR networking meeting on February 14th. Those are my staff trip requests.
I have a motion for approval, please, a motion and a second.
I move we approve the staff travel.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Carroll, second by Mrs. Gibson, that we approve the staff travel. Questions? All in favor, please show your hands. Unanimous, Ms. Bishop. Okay, 5.7, field trips, Mrs. Joseph.
Okay, we have two field trips. The high school high-tech, that's a program being sponsored by Ms. Jody Price, and it's being funded by that high school high-tech program. And they are asking to attend a field trip to Tallahassee Community College on March 8th. And she's got a list of her students that will be attending with her. And then we've got another trip. This is being sponsored by Ms. Jada Williams. It's going down to Big Bend Technical College. They're actually having a high school open house tour, and that's on February 15th. Those are the trips I have.
Okay. Board members?
I move to approve the field trips.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Carroll, second by Mrs. Gibson, that we approve the field trips. No questions? All in favor, please show your hands. Unanimous, Ms. Bishop. Okay, item 5.8, school restructuring consultant, Ms. Joseph.
Okay, in our last meeting, I had asked about contracting or working with, getting a consultant to help us in our restructuring process. Now, what I've included for you is the resume of this person. Is Dr. James Brown. He's a retired educator and district administrator out of Gadsden County. I met him through the accreditation team. I used to serve a lot on the sex accreditation teams, and he was the co-chair when we did district accreditation for Hillsborough County. And so he is one of the school district has been through restructuring. He's got that experience, but he's also has experience working with small districts as well as large districts, and he's got his own company, he's got extensive experience in working with different kinds of schools. And I know by working with accreditation sex, which is Cargill now, that he's well trained. Now, that's who I would like to do the consulting with. And what I also presented to you is a sample agreement of some things that we would like for him to do. And I asked you, did you have any other comments about could we cater that a little different? And Ms. Thompson mentioned that she would want to see various different scenarios.
That's what I wanted, the pros and cons. I think I asked you about, you said it's restructuring, but then I want the pros and the cons of the restructuring.
Well, I would like to be able to look at different options. You know, I don't want to just say this is all, the only choice that we have.
That's exactly.
So that's the question I had was, can we explore various avenues to this?
That's what I was pertaining to with Thompson.
It can be done, that's why I asked you what other items would you like to be included into that? And so we can include that. Now, what I did also was in there, he's got his sample price of what it would be and the time frame.
I didn't guess that, the sample price. It was
It was in that document that you received that you read.
okay, and I've read it, I have it in front of me, and I do not see it.
It was
Yes,
in an
it is. It's
email.
midway down, she's got
Okay.
it in her hand.
Okay,
Let me circle it so she'll see it, but it's on that same document.
I read it, I can see it, I see it clearly now. I did
It's on
not
the other
have
one that
this.
you had in your hand also.
No, ma'am.
That's
Pass
not-
it down so she can see it's
Oh,
not in there.
okay, that was on another document, okay, that's not the
Thank you.
one. Okay, so I can include that and we can proceed with that.
Ms. Joseph,
Yes, ma'am.
what's my little thing? And, you know, there are some acronyms that are either some abbreviations of what? MGT, what does that stand for? He's
Okay, he
talking,
was telling you that was his work experience. Well, that was a company that he's worked with before. What does
what does
MD?
MGT stand for?
That's a company that we had.
I understand it's the company, but what's the name of the company? It's just the initials of the company.
I
It's
don't
called
remember the name.
MGT Consulting out of Tallahassee.
What's the name of it?
Diverse experience in, to help public professionals be more efficient, to help the community benefit.
What's the name of it? What's the
MGT.
MG?
What's the name of it?
It
MGT.
just says MGT
Those are
Consulting.
initials, what's the name of it? Management Group?
Let me see. MGT Consulting.
I couldn't hardly find it when I tried to Google it.
I'm looking, hang on. They're
We
out of
have used
Tallahassee.
that company before.
I wasn't on the board. I guess when you used it, I tried to Google it, but I couldn't find it. That's why I
Is
did
that-
that notation, MGT.
have?
They were founded in
Question mark.
1975. They partner with school districts and higher education programs.
Well, it's okay. I just wanted to Google it and couldn't find the name. All I, you know, those initials. So thank you. It's okay. Well,
I'm not sure what.
what you said, Ms. Hill? Okay, well, that's not a biggie. That's not a, we can move on. Okay. Okay, members.
Okay, so we want to have various scenarios included in this.
I'd like to get a motion, because I'd like to discuss this, but we haven't had a motion, we haven't had a second, and then I want to discuss it.
We can discuss it before we have the motions and the seconds and whatever. And then,
Well, I'd rather go through the proper channels.
those are proper channels.
You get-
Robert's rules, I'm very familiar with it.
Well,
You can discuss it before, I mean, it's on the table now, you can discuss it now. And then,
Okay,
you
let
know,
me tell you what it's
either we can take a vote, but it can happen either way.
Yes,
well, no, we don't want to take a vote yet. We have to.
That's exactly, but
Right.
what I'm saying, you said you wanted to take the vote, but said that you said the proper
No, I said I
procedure.
want to have a motion, not a
Yes,
vote.
Okay, a motion and a second, well, we could do that under discussion without doing the motion and the second.
Okay, well, whatever, you're the chair. I'll, whatever you.
So if you want to go ahead and discuss it, please do.
Well, okay, let me start by saying I respect the superintendent. We haven't always agreed, but we managed to disagree agreeably, let's say.
Yes,
You've been in this county for over 30 years, I would imagine, the school system. You know the school system.
yes, ma'am.
You are very familiar. You've been a teacher, you have been an administrator, now you're the superintendent. You were voted to make decisions about this school system, because you are the CEO. The CEO is in charge. You're here on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, ma'am.
School board members do not run the show. We have our responsibilities, but we do not run the show. And the thoughts of putting out, you talk about money? Okay, you sent us an email. This is what I got out of it. Phase 1 would be $100 an hour, not to exceed 5,000. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is the implementation. That's the same hourly. This could escalate out of control. And you know what it boils down to, in my mind? This is getting somebody's opinion. We're paying somebody who has no knowledge of our school system. It's in other words, he's going to come back and he's going to say, do this, do that, or you could do this and you could do that. And right now, you've got directors, coordinators, you've got principals, you've got vice principals, you've got people running around all over the place that could get together and get as much information as you're going to do this. We cannot afford it. Now, that's me. I've been the lone wolf before, and I'll be it again.
I'm quite
We
understanding what you're
cannot
saying.
afford it, but
If
that's just me.
If you got $100,000 and you keep nibbling it off and nibbling it off and you need $100,000, but if you keep nibbling it off and when you come down, you don't have that $100,000, what you need it for.
But that's how I feel about it. I feel like maybe you've underestimated yourself, Mrs. Joseph.
What do you mean
You
by
are
that?
capable of, looking at everything. We have Rose that's given us all the information under the sun. In other words, but we're going to bring in a so-called expert and pay him. That's just my 2 cents. I'm sorry.
Okay, may I respond to that, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may respond.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the reason behind this is that we are basically, we need to come to a decision. Every time I come to a meeting, you want more and more information, okay? I have regular things to do, okay? I want to give you something that's complete. I don't want to give you a half-done job.
I said I'll
If the
respect you.
board will
I'm not
make a
going to
deci-
argue with it.
No, I'm not
Yeah.
arguing, I'm just explaining
Right.
why I need someone to give you some documentation that will answer all your questions, because I'm trying to run day to day, as you have conceded that I run the day-to-day operation. And I get here at 7 o'clock every morning, which you know.
No, I'm
Okay?
not discrediting you at all.
And to get the documentations and the information
It's-
you want in a timely manner, and so we can make a decision and move on. Okay?
I'm not going to debate it.
I
I gave you my
disagree.
opinion.
I agree. We need to conserve money. We need to conserve money, okay? I can promise you that it will be less than a feasibility study that we almost begged for, and then we backed out and found out how much that cost. But I will keep this less than the feasibility
I didn't beg for any
study.
studies. I've got 3 studies right here in front of me. We've got the information. I know we're not making a decision. You requested for us to put this off, and, okay, we agreed, that's okay. But to pay someone, it's almost sinful to me. Now, that's just me. I'm sorry. I was elected by the people in District 2 to voice my opinion, and this is my opinion.
I respect your opinion.
Yeah.
But you want documentation, you want it now. I'm trying to plan for next year, okay?
I could make a decision right this minute. I've done my studies, I've done my research and reading and everything I need to do.
Okay.
But, we're not going to do it right now, we know that.
But
I just,
that was
this,
the rationale behind
okay,
that.
I understand your rationale,
Okay,
but
thank you,
this,
ladies.
this hit me though. I just,
Person you asked, and she has given the rationale.
All right, well, that
And
was-
so you said, she has said, so we'll move on with the meeting. Are you satisfied with the answer that she gave you?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Yes, ma'am. So it's up to the board.
Well, we've got to have a motion and we got it a second.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say something.
Please.
Respectfully, Ms. Joseph, I do think you are very capable, and I appreciate all of the hard work that you have been doing to get the information that we've asked for. But I will say this district, with all of these board members and Ms. Joseph included, we have never been through a restructuring. We are looking for someone who has outside information, who can come in and make sure this is done properly and that all things are looked at properly. Not that we're just gonna just hope it works out and years down the road, look back and say, well, we wish we would have known this, or we wish we would have known that. So in my opinion, it is a little bit of money, I agree, but we're talking about money, saving money, or, you know, this is something that's going to have a long-term effect on the district. And I don't think we need to look at it willy-nilly and just say, well, we hope it works out for the best, so.
Ms. Thompson,
I hope-
I'm going to disagree with you on that. We've never, 4 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, the same conversation that we're having now, we had that. And we had a community committee to come up with this. And these are people who live here, pay taxes here, and they vote here. And so this is the same that happened 6 years ago. We had the same town hall meetings at each school. The citizens at each school did not agree with it. Whatever happened, I was not on the board at that particular time, but as I was on the board the previous time, this is the third time that we've had it, that we've had questions and concerns about it. So now you're saying like we are going into reconstruction. We haven't decided that yet. You know, that's all that I'm saying.
I'm not saying that we are, I'm just saying if we were to move that way, not to be disrespectful of any citizen or any employee of this district, these people have professional credentials and have done these things before.
And they have no attachment to this community, so they're just gonna just go ahead and just slice it, and not consider the children or anything. It's all about money.
That's why I have asked for multiple avenues to be explored.
I'd like to ask our attorney a question. Mr. Reeves, like I said, the amount. It's right now, talk about willy-nilly. Okay, it's not going to be more than 5,000, but then again, phase 2 is going to be more than 5,000, because otherwise you wouldn't, or unless we're not going to go into phase 2, which is the implementation. So therefore, we're just saying, oh yeah, go ahead and do it. How much is it going to cost?
So my reading of this document is that you've got phase 1. Phase 1, he's billing at $100 an hour, not to exceed 5,000. So
Right.
what you'd be, if you agreed to do this, all you would be agreeing to is $5,000 for phase 1. Now, phase 2 says there'll be a scope of work that will have to be approved before he goes into phase 2. If you look at the very last sentence there, it says consultation fee for phase 2 will be contingent upon the scope of work required by the district at the same hourly rate. So once you get through with phase 1, he's going to bring it back to the board. You guys will approve a scope of work, and then you move into phase 2, or you will not approve a scope of work and you wouldn't move into phase 2. So I think if you were to approve this, you're agreeing to the phase 1 not to exceed 5,000, but then a scope of work's got to come back before you've got to approve a scope of work before he starts phase 2. Now, is that your
That's
understanding?
correct. Before we go to phase 2, before we spend any money past $5,000, it will come back to the board.
Well, thank you for that clarification.
But we've got to make a decision, one way or the other, so we can move forward.
And that's
we
what,
can vote.
it's on the agenda now. Do we have a recommendation to approve or disapprove of the plan? A motion, second.
I move to approve the plan.
I second.
It has been properly moved by Mr. Carroll, second by Mrs. Thompson, that we approve.
Can I say, Mr. Council, one more time?
Sir?
Yeah, you can
Well,
discuss.
let me take the motion
Okay.
through, and then we can discuss it. Here's my thing. Okay. That we approve a pre-plan and framework proposal for reorganization. Okay. Any questions now? You
Now,
want to say something?
what I'm approving is just the phase 1
Yep.
of the thing. because he may come back and say something that we don't care to hear, and we ain't gotta go to phase 2. Or we could do phase 2 SF if we have to.
That's true.
I just wanna know from somebody that's done it before, what some of the difficulties is, what some of the, like you say, the pros, the cons, what you was talking about a while ago. I mean, what's the pros of doing it this way? What's the cons of doing it this way? What's the pros of doing it this way? The cons of doing it this way.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I just want to make one comment. For me, I appreciate, wanting to make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure that the decision that's made or the plan that is put in place is going to be in the best interest of the whole district. The only thing that I worry about is with us deciding to stall this a little bit is, we also need to take into consideration, the cuts that are going to be made for us to get through the next school year for this to even take place. So we really need to be, addressing that sooner than later.
Okay.
I didn't get what you meant. Can you say that one more time?
So in other words, we're pushing this off for another school year. We got to survive another school year. What are we cutting and how are we cutting it so that we can get there?
Oh, I got you.
So what you're saying is this person supposed to propose how we're gonna cut?
No, it doesn't, not this person. I'm just putting on record that after she does what she needs to do, if this gets approved, we need some recommendations on how we're going to cut to get through the next school year in the meantime.
And so the board is really responsible for that?
Correct, yes, ma'am. That's
We're
my,
really responsible for that?
Yes, ma'am.
So then that's when you have workshops and all that good
Correct,
stuff?
yes,
and
ma'am.
everything. Okay, so any other comments, discussions? We'll take the vote. All in favor of? 3. All opposed, same hand. 2. 3, 2, 4. 3, 4, 2 against. Okay. Item 6, other items of interest.
5.9.
Yeah, 5.9, that was added to the agenda. Thank you, Mrs. Joseph. The 2023-24 class size reduction compliance plan.
Okay, Ms. Hill, you want to explain that, please, ma'am?
We have, we've tried to meet the class size requirements in each school. The one place where we did not meet the class size requirement was Madison County Central School kindergarten. Part of the reason for that is we have advertised and advertised and advertised, and we still have a teaching vacancy for that grade level. So what we did was combine classes. We are over just one kid per class. And so it is by class period. Each student has 6 class periods. So, but it's really, for each teacher, it's like one student. So we do have to submit a compliance plan, even though we no longer have to pay. When we go over, we do have to submit, a plan on how we're going to try to not be in this position next time around. And so, all I could say is we're going to advertise, we're going to try to get, certified teachers so that, we're fully staffed. So that's the best we can do. I also put on there that we're discussing restructuring, but not that we were going to do that, but we are discussing it.
Okay, so up under here, it says the summary of schools plan.
Yes, ma'am.
You want to read that? Thank you. Me too.
So it says Madison County Central School was short-staffed for 22-23. There are 3 teaching positions that have not been filled. One of those was at kindergarten. At the present time, the district is advertising for those positions. Filling those positions would decrease the class size for those grade levels, and the district is also investigating a restructuring plan that would allow for more efficient use of personnel.
Thank you.
How many are allowed in the kindergarten class?
18.
18.
Thank you.
Okay. Because I do go into a kindergarten class there, and she doesn't look like she has 18, but I'd like to know how many students are in each kindergarten class.
Okay.
Not right now.
Okay. Yeah, I can provide
No,
that
if
for you.
it's 18, would be 19 then in each class, wouldn't it? If we're one over. Something like 19.
Right. The average is like 19 per class.
Okay.
So you just need approval for that, so I can
Yes,
submit
ma'am.
that to the Department of Education.
And we did
she
have
got
that
it.
plan in our packet.
Okay.
And, now board is up to you.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the class size reduction plan.
Okay, second.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Knight, second by Mr. Carroll, that we approve the, class size reduction plan. Any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, Bishop. Okay, now we'll go to other items of interest. Ms. Joseph?
Okay, one thing that I didn't discuss when we were talking 5.8, I do have a list of the committees that we mentioned, and we've got those list of names, and I will be sharing it with Dr. Brown in his process of doing his work. Ms. Thompson gave me two names, Mr.
Byron Poor and Shamiria Roberson.
I've got those names.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Carroll, he called about some names, but those persons never did
Yeah,
come.
I gave him the wrong email. I have to go check
Okay,
that.
but you can, if you still have any names to submit, please submit them. Okay, a couple of things. On a lighter note, positive note. We attended a FISBIT meeting, which is our insurance meeting. It was a very, very good meeting, very informative meeting, and I think Ms. Knight got baptized in the fire.
I sure did.
Okay, it's a lot going on with our insurance, but we won this award for being the most improved in risk management funding.
Which we will not get next year.
But
Thank you, Idalia.
it's a good group that we work with. It costs a lot because you heard Ms. Rainick say it's gonna be what, $1.3 million next year for our premium. But the response that we received when the incident occurred, you know, you couldn't ask for more. We're still working with them, and they're still, we meet with them every day, but it's a lot that's going on. Couple other things. I'd like to congratulate Ms. Christina Knight for winning the District Teacher of the Year. And we also had I'd like to congratulate the winners for the creative writing contest. And that was on Monday last week. Upcoming events, there's going to be a Black History program at the Central School on February 16th, TBA. That's all I can tell you about that. The 8th grade, the high school is having 8th grade CTE orientation, so on the 15th, was that tomorrow? No, tomorrow. Tomorrow, the high school is taking all the 8th graders, will be going to the high school exploring their CTE programs. And on the 19th, even though Mr. Killsworth has sent it out several times, the 19th is, even though it's a holiday, it's a school day, it's a make-up weather day. Progress reports will go home on Wednesday. You've been hearing a lot of different codes, and so I'm going to share with you, I got this from Mr. Williams, what these different codes mean that's going on at the various sites. When they call a lockdown, when they call evacuate, and shelter in place. These are the little keywords of what's going on. I think that's all I have for you. Are y'all still getting reports from each principal about the activities going on campus?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Turner?
No, good questions of me.
Okay. Whoever next. It's your
I've got a
choice.
lot of good news that I'd like to share.
Okay.
This is a good time, this is a good part of the meeting. On January 25th, there was a literacy night at Madison County Central School, and they had various centers. A lot of people came to it. I'd like to thank all those who have made this event possible. I like events at school that bring in the community. The creative writing, like Ms. Joseph said, they were recognized as students, the winners there. And I'd like to thank the schools and the teachers who participated in this activity. Your interest and enthusiasm flows onto your students. Also, on the same night, January 30th, Mrs. Gibson did it. She went to Pinetta School after the creative writing.
She was a trooper.
We can do it. Anyway, went to Pinetta. They had a family literacy night. There was lots of planning went into that night, deciding which activity would be best for the students. A huge crowd gathered. Everyone went home with learning packets, which was wonderful. They can review those at home. And there was a fabulous dinner that night enjoyed by all. And then on February 1st, I'm going to use the word fabulous again, the teacher recognition banquet was held. The teacher of each year was recognized, and you could tell there's a love of teaching by the way those teachers spoke. A delicious meal was prepared by Miss Mona Kelly's culinary class. They did a wonderful job. Congratulations to Mrs. Quishina Knight, who was the selected teacher of the year. She's a secondary teacher at Madison County Central School. I'd like to thank the Madison County Foundation in Excellence in Education for providing the opportunity for us to celebrate our teachers. I've got some news from FFA. A member completed at the district in an extemporaneous, thank you, Mrs. Hill, extemporaneous public speaking, off the cuff. Bree Rasmussen placed third at the District 3 contest. She won sub-district contest to advance to this district level. Congratulations to Bree. FFA also had 4 members compete for the first time ever in the Environmental Science CDE Career Development Event, finishing 7th in the state, with Jacob Knighton finishing 10th. This was a team activity, so I'd like to acknowledge, along with Jacob, Tyler Ward, Alden Bass, Sadie Curtis. I'd like to recognize a teacher at Madison County Central School. I don't know him as a teacher, but I know him from what I see, and I am impressed. Mr. Tony Straughter. Tony is a product of the Madison County school system. He graduated from Madison County High School, went on, I believe, a football scholarship to the University of South Carolina. He teaches law studies and critical thinking to 7th graders. He's also employed by Wild Adventures as a security guard. Like I said, I don't know Tony as a teacher. Our paths have crossed a couple of times during the past few months. He's very polite, respectful, and pleasant, a good role model for the young students. I'm thrilled that he has chose to come back to Madison County to teach. And I'm proud to say he is a former, I was his kindergarten teacher, so we had a connection to begin with, but I hadn't seen him in years. Tony, may you have a long and successful career in education. Thank you.
I would like to say thank you to all the parents and community members that came to the meeting tonight, and I would also like to recognize our teachers of the year, Miss Quishina Knight. She holds a special place in my heart because she is one of my son's teachers. He's in 7th grade at Madison Central, so I want to congratulate her and all the other teachers of the year for the district for each school, and our creative writing winners. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.
I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank Miss Sharita Livingston and their lunchroom staff for their part in the Teacher of the Year banquet, as well as the culinary class. It was really good. The meal was good, but the kids, they were really good serving and just being pleasant to people. And I also like to thank our resource officers for being here. And that's all I got.
I thank everybody who attended this meeting, and I thank everybody in the school system for whatever duties and capacity that you serve. Thank you.
May I say one other thing?
Yes, ma'am.
You got something to say?
Yeah, you can go.
Okay, I would like to thank Ms. Selena Legenda. We've had all these meetings and we've asked people, give me your ideas, give me your ideas. I would like to tell you, I appreciate you writing out your ideas and bringing them to me. Now, you didn't have to bring them to me, but you followed through, okay? And you gave me diverse, avenues to look at. Thank you.
Okay, and for me, I just want to echo what everybody has said tonight. We've had a lot going on in the schools, and it's a lot of positive things going on in the schools. The only additional items that I would like to add is I would like to also thank Ms. Christy Adams for all of the hard work that she's doing out at Madison County Central School. We had a long list of volunteers. They were 99% of them for Madison County Central School, just based on her hard work and just being out there, being a positive role model for our kids. I would also like to report that I did get to attend the FISBIT conference.
Yes.
And, it's a learning curve, and it's a lot different than traditional insurance, but it is a blessing to the district that, I am honored to be able to learn more about. And then I would also like to report that I set a goal for myself this year, that I wanted to accomplish my certified board member designation in my first year as a board member, and I did receive my plaque in the mail and achieved my goal.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Move for adjournment, please.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.